All right, welcome to the Krueg Show, everybody. As we get things rolling on a Friday morning, Chase Senior in the house. We're striking up the band. Niners win big in Seattle. Dominant first half. Third quarter, not so much. But then the Niners with the fourth quarter touchdown to add one more on top, and the 49ers win going away against the Seattle Seahawks. And now it is time for the Philadelphia Eagles. Chase, good to see you, man. What'd you think of the win last night?
Yeah, I thought it was really impressive how they started that game. I thought that they really set the tone and the momentum of it. They dictated the game flow early on. And I know that there was a little bit of that lull there stretching from the end of the second quarter into the third quarter. And then Brock Purdy just drops that dime to Brandon Ayuk to really salt the game away on what was an absolutely terrific throw, dropping it right in the bucket. Pinpoint precision to Ayuk, right in between four defenders of that Seattle Seahawks zone defense. And you got to give props to how the defense played. They continued to pressure and sack the quarterback. That's 3 games in a row where they've really been eating up along that front. And Charvarius Mooney-Ward, I thought, had his best game in a Niners uniform last night, being able to stick with DK Metcalf.
And the Niners got a little payback because one of the things that rubs Niner fans wrong was that during the Harbaugh era, Richard Sherman and the Seahawks ate turkey on the 50 at Levi's. And people were like, it was bad enough to lose, but they ate turkey at the 50, And so last night, I guess Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Brock Purdy got a chance to maybe eat a little turkey at the 50. And I think Deebo might have thrown his drumstick into the stands. But it was a great win all around for the 49ers. A lot of people will point to the defense and say, man, it was the defense that led the way. And the defensive line definitely dominated Seattle's offensive line. But I thought that the play calling, the rhythm, the attack, the offense in the first half was just ripping off huge chunks of yardage by run, by pass. Purdy, Deebo, CMC, Kittle, Ayuk. I mean, they were all involved. What did you think of the Niner offense?
Thought it was terrific. I loved a lot of the pre-snap motion, a lot of the window dressing, a lot of the play calls at opportune times to really take advantage of what Seattle was doing on the defensive side of the ball. I thought Kyle Shanahan, as the young folks would say, was in his bag last night. And the Niners offense was just so versatile. And I think this is a really good sign going into this Eagles game, is that San Francisco is really just clicking on all cylinders, not just offensively, but defensively. Their defensive line has been eating. The linebacking core is always going to be good with Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. Once again, they were wreaking havoc from sideline to sideline. The defensive secondary, I think, has really turned it around, and it all has happened because they benched Isaiah Oliver, moved Diamador Lenore into the slot. Ambry Thomas has been cooking on the outside in addition to Charvarius Ward. But going back to what San Francisco is doing offensively, they were so multiple. And when they're that multiple, they're so diverse and versatile, they're so difficult to stop. Because last night, George Kittle doesn't do much, but it was another Deebo Samuel fantastic performance against Seattle. He always seems to play well against them and the Los Angeles Rams. He gets up for these games in the NFC West as a running back, as a wide receiver. Shanahan went to him often. Brandon Ayuk was somewhat silent up until he caught that touchdown. Jawan Jennings made that really critical play in which he dragged a couple of defenders for that critical third down conversion early in the game, which I thought was really important. But what San Francisco was doing, Seattle had no answers. And I thought in between the 20s, they were able to run the football at will, which then set up a couple of play action passes for Purdy to take shots downfield. And then in the red zone, I thought that Kyle Shanahan dialed up some really, really clever and creative play calls. And now you put all that on tape going up against the Eagles, and you look at this Niners team, I just think that they're so difficult to stop when they're operating and clicking like that, when they're more of kind of that balanced offense as compared to having to fight back in games, coming back from behind, and they become a little bit more pass happy.
A couple guys that really stood out on offense. Charlie Warner.
Yep.
I thought Charlie Warner was fantastic. He got Pro Football Focus's highest grade from the offense, but I just love their 2 tight end look in the run game. Warner's not, a blow you out of the hole kind of a tight end, but man, he will lock on, keep driving his feet, and he's an excellent wall off blocker, positional blocker. He's a try hard guy. right now, I think one kind of underrated aspect of what the Niners are doing is the Warner Kittle combo are giving them quite a bit in the blocking in the run game as blockers.
Yeah, I agree. And how about some of the special teams plays that San Francisco made as well? And one of the really good special teams plays was by Charlie Warner on that punt where Dallas kind of dropped the punt, but then Warner punched it away. Ronnie Bell was able to recover it. That was also a big play in the football game, too. It didn't really result in San Francisco scoring a touchdown, if I remember correctly, but all those plays just kind of serve as momentum changers. And sticking with special teams really quickly, last week they activated Darrell Luter Jr. He makes that huge tackle on the kick return coverage on D. Eskridge to save 4 points on the board. And then they activated Samuel Womack to the active roster before the game, and he downed one of those punts inside the 5. And I know that some people don't think that special teams are that important. I really do think that at moments it does serve as a third of the game. Mitch Wishnowsky has been fantastic as a punter this year with some of those coffin corner punts and being able to pin the offense deep. And for Darrell Luter Jr., Samuel Womack, Charlie Warner to make plays like that were very impactful, that's what championship teams do. Up and down the roster from guy 1 to guy 53, obviously those numbers change on game day. You want everybody to kind of put their fingerprints on the game. And that's what I was really encouraged by in this game for San Francisco last night, is that everybody was finding a way to make an impact. And the team right now is just finding ways to contribute. But I'm with you. A couple of those plays that Charlie Warner made, and when you look back at it on the stat sheet, they're not going to look like they were that integral throughout the course of the game, but some of those 2 tight end sets allows you to confuse the opponent a little bit, because if you're in 12 personnel, they're not sure if a running play is coming, but then you can operate play action off of that 12 personnel. Kittle can go out as a pass catcher, Warner can go out as a pass catcher, or they can be a blocker in that formation as well. It's just the diversity to this offense right now that has allowed Kyle Shanahan to kind of keep defenses off guard a little bit, and Charlie Warner has certainly played a part of that.
Yeah, the other guy who I thought, if you said, give me your number one takeaway on this game, I would say, well, man, the Niner D-line, since they added Chase Young, has just been crazy good. Hargrave is now playing like Hargrave. Armstead is probably never played better. I mean, Armstead was fantastic. I don't care what the Pro Football Focus grade they gave him a pretty low grade. Or no, I guess they gave him an 82.2. So he got that's a good grade actually. For Armstead, he got one of the higher grades for the D lineman, but he's played the last 2 games at such a high level. But the guy, to me, if you said what really stood out, because I expected the Niners got 61 pressures in the last 3 games against Seattle. So the Niner D line has dominated their O line, and it happened again in this game. But the one that I wasn't sure of, and the thing that to me was the overwhelming positive, is the way that Ambry Thomas is playing on the corner. He was the Niners' highest graded player of the game. They gave him Pro Football Focus gave him a 90.2 overall grade. He had a 90.5 coverage grade. He allowed just 2 catches for 16 yards on 4 targets. He got a pick, and the pick that he had was just a real high level interception. And when they were targeting Ambry, Geno had a 20.8 passer rating. Ambry Thomas is coming of age at exactly the right time for the 49ers.
Yeah, and I think this whole defensive turnaround coming out of the bye, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but that lineup change has really improved this Niner secondary. And during that 3-game losing streak to Cleveland, Minnesota, and Cincinnati, San Francisco couldn't generate consistent sacks on the quarterback, and then they weren't tied up with the back end. They just weren't in sync. And I think over the bye week, they were able to examine a couple of things. And this defensive line coming out of the bye week has been outright dominant, just taking over games and dominating the opposing offensive line. But in that secondary, you bench Isaiah Oliver, who in the previous 4 games going into the bye week had allowed a completion rate of 100%, second lowest graded cornerback in the NFL going into the bye. You bench him. You put Diamador Lenore, whose lack of height, I think, has him better suited to play in the slot. Charvarius Ward has played really good football over the last couple of weeks, but Ambry Thomas has been awesome. And really, in the last 3 weeks, he's given this defense a massive boost. And in coverage yesterday, you talk about the 2 catches allowed, only 16 yards, 2 pass breakups, an interception, 1 forced incompletion, a passer rating against of 20.8. And going back to that interception that you were talking about, that was an instinctual play. You know, he read the eyes of Geno Smith, and he's defending Tyler Lockett. He makes a break on the football, and that's a high-level type of cornerback instinctual play. And Ambry Thomas has been doing this over the last 3 weeks. So this defense is better because of his emergence and his play. And I think back to that game against Jacksonville when him and Steve Wilkes had that kind of like emotional, pumped up interaction on the sideline. And to me, it looked like Wilkes was saying to him, this is the type of player that you can be. You were a 3rd-round pick for a reason. I have a defensive back background. I can bring the best out of you. You just need to be a little bit more consistent. And then Ambry Thomas kind of responded by saying, look, I told you I can do this. Thank you for giving me an opportunity. And he's taken advantage of this opportunity. The biggest thing with him to start his career, it's just been lapses. It's been inconsistency, but he has been a consistent player on that outside, and it's really helped take this defense to the next level.
Yeah, no, he looks fantastic, and the Luter, Womack, Ambry, suddenly their defensive backfield looks a lot more energetic and a lot faster. Are the Eagles going to get Shaq Leonard?
So they actually just cut Derek Barnett, a 2017 first-round pick out of Tennessee. That opens up a roster spot. According to Adam Schefter, according to Diana Rossini, a couple of teams interested in Shaq Leonard. It includes Philadelphia. It includes Dallas because Leighton Vander Esch is out for the year with another neck injury. It could be the end of his career, unfortunately. And then the Minnesota Vikings also said to be interested, but they just brought back Anthony Barr. So I think the Eagles are in the running for Shaq Leonard, them opening up a roster spot by letting go of Derek Barnett, who was out on Monday night because of personal reasons, and then going into the bye against the Cowboys, he was a healthy scratch for the first time of his career. I think could open up an opportunity for them to sign Shaq Leonard. I don't think he's the player that he's been in previous years. He got off to a great start. He went to South Carolina State. He's a 2nd-round pick to start his career in his first 4 years, 3-time first-team All-Pro and 1 second-team All-Pro. But he played 3 games last year. He played 70% of the snaps this year. Couple of back surgeries, which I'm really concerned about. And after having pretty solid sack numbers for a linebacker the first few years, he has no sacks the last 2 years. It's crazy, Larry. A lot of people were having a conversation in that 2021 offseason when he was up for a deal and Fred Warner was up for a deal, when he actually became the higher paid linebacker as compared to Fred Warner. Who's the better off-ball linebacker in the league? That conversation has taken a turn. Fred Warner has continued to play at a Hall of Fame clip, whereas Leonard has gone downhill. But as a rotational linebacker, maybe he could help Philadelphia. That's something to keep an eye out for sure.
What do you make of the 3-point spread in the Buffalo game on Sunday for the Eagles? I mean, it almost seems like Vegas is either telling you the Eagles are going to backslide here. I know it's a desperation game for Buffalo, but Buffalo's been terrible. They've only won once on the road all year. Philly is undefeated at home. I thought this spread would be more like 6, 7, or 8. Instead, it's a very small spread. Is Vegas trying to tell us something about that Bills-Eagles game Sunday?
I thought it was a little bit of a surprising line, too. I wasn't going to go up to a touchdown line with Philadelphia giving 7 to Buffalo, but I did think it was going to be about a 4 or 5 point line. I think there are a couple of things at play. I do think the desperation factor for Buffalo is real. They also played really well offensively against the Jets last week, and that's a really good Jets defense that has bottled up Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen earlier in the year. Eagles pass defense has struggled this season up until pitching a second-half shutout against the Chiefs, but those Chiefs weapons aren't good, and Kansas City did drop 5 passes. I also think what's important to note here is Philadelphia on a short week. They played Monday night against Kansas City in a really emotional game, as we saw with Nick Sirianni and with a lot of Eagles players really jacked up about that victory. This could be a letdown spot for the Eagles, and that's something that the odds makers always factor in. And I think that plays a role in this line being what it is.
Okay, so you cover the Niners, you cover the Eagles. Um, you obviously are very well familiar with the NFC Championship game last year and how things ended. The 49er players then, the Eagles went on to the Super Bowl. The Niners went into their offseason. Several Niners showed up at the Super Bowl and, of course, were asked about the NFC Championship game loss. And more than a couple, George Kittle and others, said that they believe the 49ers would have won if Brock Purdy had not gotten hurt. That obviously made huge headlines in Philadelphia. And the Eagles basically said, hey, you disrespected us. You can say that you could have won, but you shouldn't go on there and say you would have won or should have won if Purdy doesn't go down. So there's a lot of bad blood. The Niners have circled this game. They badly want it. I'm sure the Eagles fans would love nothing more than the deal the 49ers a serious blow. Whether it's for home field or not, Eagles could lose the game and still get the number one seed and have the first round bye in home field throughout the playoffs. So that's not necessarily on the line, depending on what Philly does against Buffalo this weekend. But is the game more important for the Niners or the Eagles? And, who's more motivated here? Is it the Niners because they talked a big game and now they got to back it up? Or is it the Eagles to try to throw a little pain at the Niners because maybe they feel like the Niners didn't respect the fact that they beat them in the NFC Championship game?
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating matchup, and I think the TV ratings for this game are going to be insane. And I want to start with this. I thought last year we were robbed of a potentially all-time great NFC Championship game. When you canvassed the Niners roster and you compared it with the Eagles roster, Philadelphia and San Francisco were both obviously great teams. The Eagles were the number one seed, 14-3. San Francisco ended the regular season on that crazy winning streak. They were 13-4. But multiple teams had and still do have multiple Pro Bowlers, multiple All-Pros, and future Hall of Famers. And what's funny about this matchup is that previously to that NFC Championship game, San Francisco and Philadelphia had no history at all as rivals. They met one time in the playoffs. It was in the mid-1990s when San Francisco won this really low-scoring, grimy game. But then how the NFC Championship game transpired and San Francisco's reaction to it, giving kind of fuel to Philadelphia and their fan bases, they always like to be the underdogs, has made this somewhat of a really intense rivalry game without these two organizations having much of a history. I think for San Francisco, this is the bigger game. I think that they really want to exercise their demons, and they're tired of everybody in Philadelphia calling them whiners, right? Instead of the Niners. Because, look, I think that if San Francisco had Brock Purdy healthy in that football game, it would have been a little bit closer. Now, the Eagles were still able to dominate that game outside of the Brock Purdy injury. I thought they kicked the Niners' asses in the trenches, and that was with the Eagles' offensive line and their defensive line. Anytime Josh Johnson is playing quarterback in the NFC title game and Christian McCaffrey is having to drop back. But I think for San Francisco to kind of exercise those demons and to prove to the football world, hey, if we're at full strength, this is how we match up with the team that everybody is saying is the best team in football in Philadelphia right now. And I do think the Eagles are the best team in football. To go on the road, come back by 10, hostile environment, to beat Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid at their crib after you lost to them in the Super Bowl, I think is a massive win. And I know this Chiefs offense isn't the same that it's been in previous years, but to pitch a second half shutout, I think is a really big deal. To generate a pass rush from Patrick Mahomes to consistently move him off his spot, I think is a huge deal. Philadelphia has this clutch factor and this clutch gene where they always seem to make the right play. And because Jalen Hurts is so cool, calm, and collected, the rest of the team kind of takes on that mantra and that attitude where they never feel as though they are out of a game. I think that this is going to be a terrific matchup. I think it's going to come down to the wire. I hope that finally we get to see these two teams at full strength, because I think this has the makings of being a Super Bowl matchup if it wasn't for these teams being in the NFC. But I think it's a bigger game for San Francisco because they haven't beaten the Eagles yet. The Niners have. Uh, or the Eagles have beaten the Niners, and the Eagles made it to the Super Bowl last year. And to get that confidence and to send that message that, hey, we are for real, I think it's important for San Francisco. And they've been talking about it. They've had this matchup circled since losing, and they have that sour taste in their mouths. Lastly, I was at the Super Bowl last year. I was in Glendale, Arizona on Super Bowl Radio Row. I interviewed Christian McCaffrey. I asked him about it. You could tell that he was a little bit frustrated and upset that they didn't have their team at full strength. I was there when George Kittle and Deebo Samuel were talking on Super Bowl Radio Row and making the comments that they were. I watched Deebo on the Kay Adams show, and I was like, man, they really feel as though they didn't get an equal opportunity, and I can totally see why they feel that way.
Well, and it played to the Eagle fan like disrespect, but I think what it really was the Niners' undying belief in this rookie quarterback, now the second-year quarterback. They think that Brock is special, and I don't know that the NFL fan, rank and file fan, especially when they said it, saw that specialness. Now this year, as Purdy's kind of elevated his game and played at almost an MVP type level, I think maybe that speaks a little bit more to what the Niners players were speaking to more than, hey, they disrespected us. No, I don't think they disrespected you. They just really believed in their guy. M. Patel in the chat says, Eagles play big in big moments. 49ers do not. 49ers need to get out to a lead in this game. Eagles pass D is awful. Is the Eagles pass D awful, Chase?
So it had been statistically going up against the Chiefs, but then they really shored things up on that back end. A big reason for their struggles, they hadn't had the same secondary combination in back-to-back games all year because they have suffered a litany of injuries. And it looked as though they were going to shore up slot nickel corner by signing Bradley Roby once Avonte Maddox, who's a very good slot nickel corner, went out probably for the rest of the year with the pec injury. He plays 2 games and then he's out. Darius Slay was out. James Bradbury's been banged up. They traded for Kevin Byard. Reed Blankenship has missed some time as their other safety. So finally against Kansas City, they actually had their starting secondary intact for the first time all year. Darius Slay on one outside, James Bradbury on the other, Bradley Roby in the slot, Reed Blankenship and Kevin Byard as their 2 safeties. I think they're better than what the numbers show, but context is always important, and that context is important in this conversation. I don't think that they're quote-unquote awful. I think that secondary at full strength with how good, premier, and deep that Eagles defensive line is, I think this Eagles defense is going to start to hit its stride, and I think they could pose some challenges for San Francisco because their strength is their defensive line. The Niners' weakness, in my opinion, even though they've been playing a little bit better, is their offensive line. And that's how you can really take over the game and win a game on the margins that is so closely contested between these 2 elite teams.
I think one thing that I've got to see more of, I got to see the Niners start to target Brandon Ayuk more. He only had 4 targets in this game. He only had 3 against Jacksonville. I mean, this guy's got to be a half dozen target a game guy minimum. I'd like to see him get like 10 targets a game. I think he's having that kind of a year. How do you think Philly, who do you think he matches up with the Eagles? Will the Eagles put Bradbury on him? How do you see the Eagles trying to match up with Ayuk?
Yeah, we know that Kyle Shanahan likes to mix and match with Brandon Ayuk in the slot, Brandon Ayuk on the outside, Deebo in the slot, Deebo Samuel on the outside. He'll line them up on the right side. He'll line them up on the left side. And I'm not sure if Philadelphia is going to have one particular player trail Ayuk and Deebo throughout the day. I'll also say that the Eagles linebacking core isn't the greatest. Nakobe Dean on IR for the second time this year. They have Zach Cunningham and Nicholas Morrow who have played solid ball, but I think George Kittle could play a huge role in this game, and that's a factor here. I think that San Francisco does have the edge if they can pass protect with being able to utilize their weapons in Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle against this Eagles passing defense. Because whether Ayuk is against Darius Slay or James Bradbury, that means that Deebo is taking one of the other ones. And I think that San Francisco has this slight edge there. So pass protecting is going to be critical. If I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'm starting John Feliciano again at right guard. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, they are menaces on the interior of that Eagles defensive line. They can ruin the game and alter the game plan for San Francisco if they can't pass protect. They're also the number one rushing defense in the National Football League as well. So San Francisco, if they can find success on the run, like they did against Seattle to open up the pass game, I think that that's a critical kind of storyline in this game too. But slight edge for San Francisco, and I'm with you, Larry. You utilize Brandon Ayuk any way that you can, because I'm not sure that the Eagles have the secondary personnel to stick with both him and Debo, and then you throw George Kittle into the mix as well. Maybe you line up Christian McCaffrey a little bit more out of the slot as well.
If you look at the pressures that the Niners O-line gave up in this game to Seattle, the left side, Trent Williams and Aaron Banks, only one pressure account towards Williams, 2 for Banks. So 3 total pressures. Brendel only gave up 1 in the middle. But the combo of Feliciano and McKivitz on the right side gave up seven pressures. And they'll go up against most likely Fletcher Cox and Hassan Reddick.
Yep.
How do you see that matchup? I mean, to me, this is a major part of the game next Sunday is, can the 49er, right side of their offensive line stand up to Cox and Reddick?
Yeah, luckily Tyler Kroft isn't here any longer to have to guard and defend and block Hassan Reddick on that outside. But look, I've been saying this all year on the show. I'm sure you have been as well, Larry. And I know that you always look at trench play because that can really dictate the outcome of a football game. Colton McKivitz scares the hell out of me as this season progresses. And as you get into the playoffs and you're going up against a team like the Dallas Cowboys with their personnel along the defensive line with Micah Parsons, a team like the Detroit Lions with Aiden Hutchinson, a team like the Philadelphia Eagles with Hassan Reddick. But a lot of people are sleeping on what Josh Sweat has been able to do. Statistically, he's been one of the best defensive ends in football. And then on the interior, Jalen Carter against Creed Humphrey was excellent. And the interior of that Chiefs offensive line is one of the best in the NFL. Jalen Carter was so dominant. Jordan Davis is 6'6", 340 pounds. Fletcher Cox is defying father time. I guarantee you that the Eagles are going to try to put Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, even Milton Williams, a backup, Fletcher Cox, all those personnel to that right side of the Niners offensive line to try to take advantage of the size matchup against Feliciano, McKivitz with him going up against Hassan Reddick. Jake Brendel is at a disadvantage because he's a little bit of a smaller center. That is one way that if the Niners can shore up in pass protection and they can run block and they can win that matchup at the point of attack, I think that they can win this game. If Philadelphia is able to get the advantage there and they can dominate with that personnel, with that matchup, I think that San Francisco is just going to struggle to really maintain and gather any consistency with running it and throwing it. To me, I think that's where this game is decided next week. It's along the trenches, and it's the Niners offensive line against the Eagles defensive line.
How about Derek Barnett? You mentioned Barnett. Could he help the 49ers? Would you? What's his? I mean, I know he's a little bit long in the tooth, but he's not really old by NFL standards. He's probably got 2-3 more years of life in him. Is he just a guy got caught up in a numbers game on one of the NFL's deepest units, or has he regressed significantly and he's not worth having?
Yeah, he's 28 years old. He's coming off a torn ACL last year. He is a player that has never generated a lot of sack numbers, but he has generated a lot of quarterback pressures and quarterback hits. He's tough as nails, and I think for certain defenses across the NFL and certain teams, you want a player like that who is tough and rugged. For him, things have unraveled because of decreasing playing time because he's on a defensive line that is 2 to 3 deep at every single position. Injuries have also cost him a little bit, but he's also been prone to just being overly aggressive, and he's often penalized for these really dumbass penalties, late hits, unsportsmanlike conducts, because he kind of just plays at this certain motor where he's uber aggressive and uber tough, and he tries to really make his impact be felt. And he's kind of an old school defensive end where he's not like that twitchy type of edge rusher who has like a pass rush arsenal like a Hassan Reddick He's not that player who's physically gifted like a Nick Bosa. He's just a bull rush, tough type of player. But I think San Francisco is set there with Chase Young and Randy Gregory. I thought Randy Gregory, limited snaps last night, really popped. I think San Francisco has seen something in him. That's why they were starting to give him more snaps than Drake Jackson before Drake Jackson went on IR. I thought that Chase Young had another impactful game last night. I loved what Steve Wilks was doing a couple of snaps where he had Nick Bosa and Chase Young lined up at defensive tackle, and they were kind of getting to the quarterback on some twists and stunts. So I think San Francisco, no need to really bring in Derek Barnett. He is 28 years old. I think he's going to be able to help a team out there that is looking for a defensive end. Quarterback hits and quarterback pressures, he's able to do it. Sack numbers have never really been there, but I think he's a solid rotational defensive end who just was a part of a numbers game, and that's why he wasn't playing that much. Also, I think the Eagles want to give more snaps to Nolan Smith.
What do you think of Wilks' defense the last 3 weeks? They've given up a total of 30 points, 8 forced turnovers. And also in addition to that, what did you think of Ji'Ayir Brown? I mean, we didn't see any blown coverages. There weren't any obvious gaffes. He didn't make a huge impact in the game as far as big plays, but as a defensive backfield, if they're saying your name, it's probably not a good thing. He was making his first career start. It was a short week. How did you evaluate Ji'Ayir?
I thought Ji'Ayir Brown played really well, and I think that we talked about this last week when I was on, but for those people not familiar, my job before this, I was working in Pennsylvania, and I covered Penn State football, so I watched a lot of Ji'Ayir Brown. I grew up in Pennsylvania, so I've kept close tabs on that program. I love the selection to move up to take him. In a couple of my mock drafts, I had him going to San Francisco just because I wanted to see it happen. Deshaun Gibson getting a little bit older. Obviously, he doesn't have many years left. He's played great ball, kind of been a revelation for this defense the last 2 years, but I thought you needed to find his eventual replacement. And if at some point you can pair Ji'Ayir Brown with Talanoa Hufanga, I think that is a really good safety combination. I think Ji'Ayir Brown's a little bit better in coverage as compared to Hufanga, but I like both players because the Niners have identified defensive backs who are very instinctual, who have ball skills. I mean, if you watched last night, you saw Ambry Thomas addressing and turning around to the football. That is not coached up enough in the NFL. That's what leads to flags. His interception made a beat on that football. It was an excellent play. Charvarius Ward, how many times against DK Metcalf last night did he turn around to address the football? Analytically, when he was with the Chiefs, he was a guy who was able to read plays before they happened, dissect them, make a beat on the ball. Talanoa Hufanga plays on feel, and that's why he reminds me so much of Troy Polamalu, especially when you combine that with his versatility to play in the box, play hybrid linebacker. You know, you put him in the slot a couple of times, play deep safety. Ji'Ayir Brown has all of those aforementioned skills to his game, and the Niners defense didn't miss a beat with him back there. And I think that he has really good speed, really good athleticism. I like the testing numbers for him in the NFL scouting combine, but when you watch him, he offers you and gives you a lot of the same type of skills that Hufanga does, with his ability to really be used as a chess piece and be played all across the field at all three levels. I thought Steve Wilks implemented him into the game plan. He looked ready to play once again, just like he did last week against the Bucs when he came in and had a couple of pass breakups, one in the end zone against Mike Evans, had that first career interception, and made some really critical plays down the stretch of that game. So I think the Niners are in good hands there. As for what Steve Wilks has been able to do, any defensive coordinator is going to look like a genius when the pass rush has been as dominant as it's been. But I think they've made some adjustments up front. You know, I talked about Chase Young and Nick Bosa lining up at defensive tackle coming out of the bye. They were doing that against Jacksonville. For him to continue to implement that, I think has been very smart. For the Niners to trot out a couple of bear fronts, 5-man fronts, that gives you some mismatches up front where you can win some of those battles as well. Nick Bosa coming alive has really helped this Niners pass rush as well. And it's going to be big going up against an Eagles team that has so many weapons. So this defense is really clicking at all three levels right now. And that's why they've been so good. And that's why they've given up 30 points over the last 3 weeks.
There you go. A couple supers here. RG Teamster says, how did Ji'Ayir Brown play? Well, we just talked about it right there.
Yep.
And Ricky Williams drops this one. He says, Larry Chase, hope the front office and scouting department get a Christmas bonus because, man, how does a rookie safety go in and not miss a beat? Could you see us keeping both Brown and Huff? Oh, I think that's the future at safety right there. The question is, they're kind of both strong safeties. We'll see how that goes. I think both are better in the box than they are in the deep middle. I'm old. Greg says, when you guys land in Maui, when do you guys land in Maui? I got beers for you. All right,
That'd be
Greg.
awesome.
Yeah, seriously. If you know of a killer condo, maybe we could talk. Also, kind of an interesting game. In fact, the Niners have now won 3 straight. They have ownage on Seattle up there. It's like you could almost call that Levi's North, the way the Niners have started to play up there.
Yep.
And with the win, they create the 2-game lead atop the NFC West. They hold the tiebreaker on the Seahawks. And so that's why that game was important. And then both sides of the football. I mean, offensively, the Niners scored 24 in the first half and wound up with another 30-point game. And defensively, they didn't allow a touchdown. They limit Seattle at 220 total yards and 2 field goal drives. What side of the football do the Niners have more momentum heading into Philly? On the offensive side or on the defensive side of the ball?
I think it's the defensive side of the ball right now, and I think it's slightly toward the defense. You always have confidence in Kyle Shanahan and all of these weapons on the offensive side of the ball to find a way to make it work. But I think that the biggest thing during this 3-game winning streak has been the improvements. It's been the adjustments. It's been the synergy that this defensive unit has played. There is this type of continuity that they didn't have. And I thought during that 3-game losing streak, San Francisco defensively just looked hesitant. They were playing slow. They were indecisive. They were slow to kind of attack the gaps a little bit. And this was really for everybody. They were missing a lot of tackles. I also think a big thing during this 3-game winning tear is that San Francisco has gotten back to what they were doing when they got off to that 5-0 start. They are forcing a lot of turnovers. They're number 1 in turnover differential, and they're not giving the ball away a lot. So I know that Brock Purdy threw that pick 6 last night. At that point, you're like, oh my gosh, are the Niners going to find a way to choke this game away? But that was the only turnover that they had. That was the one blemish on the stat sheet for San Francisco. And anytime you're forcing turnovers and you're playing clean ball offensively, when that comes together, it's a magical little combination. And I think that all of those things have really led to San Francisco playing their best ball of the year. I actually think they're playing better right now than they were when they got off to that 5-0 start, just because literally all 3 phases are playing really well. Like the Niners last night did not play their A game. They still score 30 points. They played their A game defensively, kept Seattle out of the end zone. What did DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith and Jigba do last night outside of that one-handed grab by Jackson Smith and Jigba? Nothing. Niners have been prone to giving up big plays to tight ends. Noah Fant and the other tight ends barely did anything either. And then the special teams. I know that they broke down on the D. Eskridge kick return, but again, like Darrell Luter Jr., plug and play, makes a huge tackle. Samuel Womack, welcome back, able to down that ball inside the 5-yard line. Charlie Warner, Ronnie Bell, making plays. Like everybody is contributing right now. And this just has a look and a feel of a championship level team. And I think that this defense playing the way that it is right now, that's why this team has more momentum on that side of the ball, especially going up against a team like the Eagles, who are so multiple on the offensive side.
All right, I'm going to share the screen here. This is kind of an interesting little graphic, and it's hard to read here. Let me see if I can blow it up at all. But basically what we're looking at here, let's see. There we go. There we go. Quarterback production with and without play action. And on all these little graphs, if you've seen this, the best players are in the top right corner.
Yep.
And this is a guy named Purdy up here in the top right corner. And it kind of shows that it's not just about the play action game with Brock Purdy. He's playing well out of the straight drop back. He's playing well out of the shotgun. It's not like he needs play action, but he's doing well, obviously, off play action as well. I bring this up, Chase, because last year against the Eagles, I kind of felt like the Eagles weren't really in any way even reacting to the play action pass fake. And if you're not going to react to the play action fake, it kind of almost you're almost giving the defense an advantage and playing into their hands by doing a lot of play action pass if they're not going to react to it. I almost feel like the better plan might be to just, don't go play action and just get the ball out fast, and get Brock in an early rhythm. What do you think? I mean, you watch the Eagles on a regular basis. They had 70 sacks last year, so
Yep.
everything was going their way on the pass rush. But that's what I saw when I watched Reddick. I saw a guy that we're talking about early in the game, first quarter. The Niners are going play action pass. He didn't flinch at the play action. The linebackers, don't look like they're worried about the play action. Like everybody's just going to play pass and react to the run. Is that what you're seeing again this year from the Eagles, or does the play action game in any way have any effect on their D?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. They had 70 sacks last year. That was 15 more than any team. It was actually the most that any team had in the National Football League since the mid 1980s, when the Chicago Bears had some of those monsters of the midway defenses. This year, the sack numbers aren't what they were a year ago, but I will say that I think that this Eagles defensive line, as far as the talent, as far as the depth, is as good, if not better. What's interesting is that a player like Hassan Reddick is top 5 in sacks since the start of the 2021 season, but he's kind of developed as a run-stuffing defensive end, kind of like Nick Bosa has developed as a run-stuffing defensive end as well. Philadelphia has done a good job of not biting on some of the play-action fakes, but I think for San Francisco, really important part of the game plan is going to be to negate that Eagles pass rush. And I think there's a couple of ways that you can do this. I want to see some of the pre-snap motions that have become a staple of Kyle Shanahan's offense with Debo, with Christian McCaffrey, with Ayuk, with Kyle Juszczyk, with George Kittle. That allows you to identify man versus zone. You can kind of identify what the defensive front wants to do a little bit. It's window dressing, where one player's in motion to the right side, then you run it to the left. You fake a handoff on that motion. You throw a quick little swing route or a bubble screen to Debo. You dump it off to George Kittle. I think if you run plays like that, and you get rid of the ball very quickly, you can negate and neutralize that Eagles pass rush. The Washington Commanders this year, yes, the Washington Commanders have had a ton of success this year against the Eagles with Sam Howell at quarterback by just implementing some quick trigger throws, not allowing that pass rush to get home. So I think that's important in the pass game. But when we go back to play action, the Eagles are the number 1 rushing defense in the NFL. If San Francisco can find a way, and I want to see Debo Samuel used at running back, I want to see Christian McCaffrey used at running back. If they can find a way to find success on the ground, and then they can implement play action after that, you have the Eagles defense on their heels a little bit. That's when they can start to question themselves a little bit. Okay, are they going to run it? Are they going to throw it? And that's when this Niners team is at its best, in my opinion, when both the pass and the rush are clicking. And given the diversity of all the weapons that Kyle Shanahan has at his disposal, I think it opens up the playbook a little bit. And that's what I loved last night. Like, this is a short week going up against the Seahawks. It's supposed to be a condensed game plan, yet I thought Shanahan was very, very creative. He's going to have that same creativity and that same feel for the game against the Eagles, given their personnel and style.
Do you like Sirianni? To me, he just seems so smug and so arrogant. He's like the hardest guy to root for. He kind of, to me, I haven't felt, this kind of head coach dislike since Jimmy Johnson in the 90s, where he was just constantly talking huge, and unfortunately his team was backing it up. And now I feel like Sirianni is very much in that same vein. He's talking big. His team's backing it up. The way he walked off the field in Kansas City was just ridiculous. And I to me that he just is a guy who just rubs me wrong. I mean, I just don't like him, and I don't know him, and I don't claim to know him, but I mean, the guy's just off the charts when it comes to smug. I mean, seriously, we all know that guy that has that kind of punchable face. And some people have said that about me, surprisingly, which I can't believe. But here, for those who don't think this guy's got a punchable face, I'm going to share the screen. Here we go. This is Sirianni leaving Arrowhead the other night. Oh God. Of course, he said it when he was safely in the tunnel with like 5 security guys around. But either way, I know you cover the Eagles, so you probably like him, and I'm sure Eagle fans, I'm sure they would say, "Hey, man, if this was your head coach, you'd love him." But whatever. I haven't even thought about it that way. I just and Teasy says, "Larry, you've got a Larry, you got a lovable face." Yeah, I don't know about that. But I mean, seriously, is there anybody that needs to be beaten up more than that guy?
Look, so I'm a little bit of a contrarian, I guess, and people probably, think that about me, and they want to punch me in the face as well, Larry. But honestly, I like Nick Sirianni, and I think that when you go 14-3 last year, you're 9-1 this year, and then in year one of a rebuild as a rookie head coach, you go from 2-6, I believe, to making the playoffs, going 9-8. He's won a lot of football games. Their player development has been fantastic. He already has 2 coaches as a part of his coaching tree going into year 3 with Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen. Sean Desai and Brian Johnson might become head coaches next. He's developing players. He's developing coaches. And when I have personal relationships with people, Larry, I like people who are real. I like people who are authentic. I like people who are not going to bullshit me. I don't want hypocrites. I don't want fakes. Nick Sirianni is authentic. I also want people who are passionate about their jobs. And for football, they live and die with the game. And that's what Nick Sirianni does. And I'm from Philadelphia, right? And a lot of people don't realize, like, in the Northeast part of the country, it is a different way of life. There are 4 seasons. People are always ornery, on edge. Things are always changing. There's a lot more pressure. The speed of life is so much quicker where everybody's on the go. And a lot of people don't realize that. Like, the mentality and the atmosphere and the feel of Philadelphia is a lot different than the West Coast, where it's a lot more laid back. So I know that Nick Sirianni is not for everybody. He is perfect for Philadelphia with the way that he carries himself, the swagger, the confidence. I also think that the locker room is kind of built off his personality a little bit, where they embrace the role of being underdogs. And look, the Eagles won a game against the team that beat them in the Super Bowl, handing them a heartbreaking defeat back in February. They went on the road, down by 10, rain coming down, difficult place to play, and they came back and outcoached Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. That is a massive, massive win. I think that he has every right to be excited. What's also kind of misleading is that people saw that clip of him in the tunnel. He was actually on the field dapping up Eagles fans and saying, "Right, the Chiefs fans, see ya." So I frankly wish Kyle Shanahan had more personality. I wish that he expressed himself a little bit more. When the Niners beat the Cowboys in the wild card round back in 2021, there's this photo of Kyle Shanahan getting all pumped up. You had Trent Williams giving the fingers back to Cowboy fans. I love that authenticity. I love that realness. So for that reason, I kind of like Sirianni. I wish more coaches had more personality and they weren't like Bill Belichick, like, yeah, convert it on third downs.
I have very few rules in life, but one of them is never talk trash while wearing a visor.
It's not a bad point. I'm not a visor guy.
I mean, come on. I mean, how badass are you if you're wearing a visor? All right, Roberta Davis says the whole town of Philly has a punchable face. And we got this one from Killiam. Says, I'd rather punch the gum out of Pierre first. That's a good one. Punch the gum out. And Randall says, Eagles, a.k.a. Vikings from last year. Teams losing games versus the Eagles, not Eagles win games. Luck runs out. Remember who told you so. All right. I got three. You can't be on the fence on these. It's an either or. It's an A or a B.
All right.
Okay. 3 quick ones on the way out. More number 1 key to the Eagles, Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman.
Howie Roseman.
I would agree.
Yeah, he's done a hell of a job in the draft and free agency of late, and then fleecing other teams with trades.
Number 1 key to the 49ers, Shanahan or Lynch?
Kyle Shanahan.
I agree. We're 2 for 2. More legit MVP candidate, Brock Purdy, Jalen Hurts.
That's a good one.
Yes.
I'm going to go slight edge to Jalen Hurts. I think when you start 9-1,
Purdy's got more touchdowns, fewer picks, and a better completion percentage.
The numbers are better for Purdy. The numbers are better for Purdy, but I think the
record is better for Hurts.
Yeah, record's better. I think the difficulty of going 9-1 after a Super Bowl loss is really difficult. And Jalen Hurts has the best numbers when tied or trailing among all quarterbacks in the NFL. So he's played his best ball when he's had to in the clutch. I also think when you look at quality of wins, Hurts has the edge there. Beat the Miami Dolphins, #1 rated offense, beat Patrick Mahomes, beat the Dallas Cowboys. I think the quality of wins are with Hurts, and he's played so well trailing and from behind, and they have the better record, and they're the #1 seed after they made it to the Super Bowl. But I will say this about Purdy, he's not getting enough love for the MVP conversation. And look, real quick before I throw it back to you, like, we now have 7 games last year for Purdy, and we have 12 games this year, right? Or 11 games this year? Yeah, 11 games this year.
11 games in 12 weeks.
The sample size is there. Brock Purdy's legit. He's just legit.
Oh, yeah,
the sample size is too long for you to look at how he's played as a young player in this league. I don't care if he has Shanahan as his head coach or the weapons that he has. He still has to execute, and he's executing.
Good stuff. Thanks to our sponsors, Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in Northern California, New York style Italian sausage and Marin Auto Glass, and of course, Underdog and Mojo Fantasy. Check the link in the description and type in the promo code Krueg. And one last one from the chat on the way out the door. RS asked the ultimate question: who is this guy? And this guy is Chase Senior rooting for in the next game.
I'm not rooting for anybody. I'm rooting for a good game.
He's rooting for his bank account.
I'm a football analyst, man. Like, I want to see a good game. I break these games down. I provide thorough analysis, and that's really what I'm here for. I'm here to do my job. A lot of people don't understand it. That's fine. You don't have to. I'm just going to keep doing me and reaching millions of people every single month on both of these channels.
Chase, what do you got going later today on your channel?
I'm going to watch this Dolphins-Jets game at 2 o'clock Central. I'm going to go for a run, and then I'm going to kind of recap what happened yesterday a little bit. This George Odom injury is pretty interesting. I think it's pretty funny how a lot of Niner fans are asking me, probably asking you. I think I saw people in the chat, should they bring back Jaquiski Tartt? Guy hasn't played football in 2 years, so I don't think so. So I'm going to have to address that a little bit. Yeah. And then just more coverage to come with all of the news that comes out of Santa Clara over the next couple of days. And then, of course, all throughout the rest of this week and next week, going to continue to preview this Eagles matchup.
Tartt, the Niners will be looking at safety options.
Yes,
they will have a workout where a bunch of safeties come in, and as soon as they do, I'll do a video on it. We'll tell you all about those guys, and Chase will be breaking it down. We'll all be breaking it down. But I don't think it's going to be Jaquiski Tartt. And as far as Chase's last answer on who he's rooting for, that I think was the equivalent of Marshawn Lynch. I'm just here so I won't get fined. Have a great day, brother. Good to see you. Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll do it next week.
No doubt. Take care.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for.